Hi there guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero Show with me, your host, Simon Comboy. Continuing on with the franchise review series today, this episode will be focused on my beloved Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So for this series, what I'm doing is I'm going through the last 10 years worth of regular season records, highlighting playoff appearances, Super Bowl wins, that kind of thing. No worry of those with the Bucs, and going for any head coaching changes that have occurred in that time frame, and then grading each draft that's occurred in the last 10 years. I'll go through that grading system once I get to that part of the episode. On the Friday episode, the weekly review, going to be taking all of this information for all 32 teams. It's going to be a really interesting episode. We're going to delve into some of those stats and we'll see if we can find any correlation between successful drafting and winning. You'll get a really good comparison of all 32 teams, figure out where they stand in terms of that kind of success. So, the Bucs in the last 10 years, 63 wins, 97 losses. Not a good record at all, to be expected. Had John Gruden 2007-2008, then the disastrous Raheem Morris era, the Youngry era, 2009 to 2011, then Greg Schiano the 2 years after that, 2012 and 2013. Disaster as well, for the polar opposite of Morris. Then Lovie Smith for 2 years, 2014 and 15, and last season was Dirk Cutter's first season. One playoff appearance in that time and a division title win, that being the first of those years, 2007, with John Gruden losing to the Giants in the wildcard round. I remember that. So going on to the drafts. So what I'm doing is I'm grading each first, second and third round pick made by the team, since those are the rounds you're expecting to get contributors and starters. If the player was a solid pick, has been what a team would hope for from a selection at that point, then they will go down as a solid and give +1 overall to the team's score. Being a bit more strict with first rounders, of course, expect more from a top 10 pick than a person picked 30th, for example. Then if they're okay, middling, acceptable draft picks, then that won't affect the score. If they are a bust, it will be a -1 modifier to the overall score. Players picked in rounds 4 through 7, most of them never ever see a football field, so I will only be highlighting players that had an impact, designating them value picks, and that will also add +1 to the team's overall score. So 2007, in the Friday episode I'm going to do my 10 favourite and least favourite classes over this time span. This one's in competition for the worst. So we've got Gaines Adams with a 4th overall pick, the defensive end. Clear bust there. That was an incredibly talented draft as well. And yeah, he was with the team a couple of years, got traded. Wasn't a success in the league before his untimely death. In the second round, Aaron Sears, the guard, was not a particularly effective player. He's got to go down as a bust. And also in the second, Sabi Piscatelli, the safety, wasn't a particularly effective player either. He goes down as a bust. In the third, Quincy Black, the linebacker, gave the team some okay years. Pretty reasonable for a third round pick. No impact there. So it was a mediocre pick. And then in the fourth and sixth, I'm sort of combining these two players to give one value pick. Tenard Jackson was a good safety for a couple of years for Tampa, then had some off the field issues and that ended his career basically. But they also got Adam Haywood in the sixth, and he's been a core special teams guy and a pretty competent backup for the team. So I'll meld those two together to form one value pick. I think that's the fairest way to do it. In 2008, in the first round, Aqib Talib, the cornerback, with the 20th overall pick. Of course, things never quite came together for him in Tampa. Clearly a great player. No doubt about that. Been fantastic in Denver, was very good for New England. Played well when he was on the field for Tampa, but had some injuries and didn't seem to be quite mature enough at that point in his career, but will go down as a solid pick. In the second, Dexter Jackson. Does anyone else remember this guy? The Appalachian State wide receiver. Had like 2 touchdowns against Michigan, got a Sports Illustrated cover, got to the NFL, scored like a kickoff return in preseason, and that was the end of that. Bust. In the third, Jeremy Zutar, the centre. He's been a solid player throughout his NFL career, can play guards, can play centre. Now playing for the Niners. Good player. That's a solid pick. And in the 6th round, Geno Hayes, the linebacker, they got a few decent seasons out of him as a starting linebacker. He'll go down as a value pick. In 2009, in the 1st round, Josh Freeman, the quarterback, with the 17th overall selection, had one fantastic season where he had like 6 interceptions, 24 touchdowns, led them to a 10-6 record, and then fell off a cliff. So he goes down as a bust. In the 3rd, Roy Miller, the defensive tackle, gave the Bucs a solid run plugger for a couple of years, then went to Jacksonville, carried on doing much the same job. Not good enough to be solid, but not a bust either. I think it was perfectly acceptable. So that's a mediocre pick there. 2010, in the 1st round, Gerald McCoy with the 3rd overall. The big debate was Sue or McCoy. Turns out both are great. Had some injuries, missed a few games, but when he's on the field, he's one of the best defensive linemen in football. So that goes down as a solid pick. In the 2nd, Brian Price, the defensive tackle. He suffered some bizarre injury where they need to reattach his hamstrings to his leg, or up to his pelvis. Yeah, he was a bust, unfortunately. In the 2nd, Aurelius Ben, the wide receiver. He was also a bust. And then in the 4th, Mike Williams. He was a really good value pick. Played quite well for the first few years, then got a big paycheck and looks like he stopped caring. But got good value for a 4th rounder out of him. Man, I was really excited about that draft class. Shame that didn't come together. Going on to 2011, in the 1st round, Adrian Claiborne with the 20th selection, the defensive end. Career started like gangbusters in Tampa, had a really good first month. That was about it. Very average kind of player, not good enough for a 1st rounder, now playing for the Falcons. He has to go down as a bust. In the 2nd, Daquan Bowers. Remember him being talked about as a potential 1st overall pick? Yeah, I think the Panthers are glad they did not do that. That would have been awful. He's a bust. In the 3rd, Mason Foster, the linebacker. Gave him a couple of okay years. He's been fine for Washington. A middling starting linebacker. That goes down as fine. Not a bust, but not a particularly solid pick either. The 2012 draft. In the 1st round, Mark Barron with the 7th overall pick. The safety has to go down as a bust. They could have had Kuechly there, man. That would have been sweet. Now he's playing for the Rams in a sort of hybrid linebacker safety role. He's been quite effective for them there, actually. But yeah, disaster in Tampa. Also in the 1st round that year, Doug Martin. This is one of the toughest ones to grade. 31st, they traded up to get him. Had 2 superb all-pro caliber seasons, his rookie year and then the year before this in 2015. And the other 3 have been... He's been injured and played poorly when he has been on the field. Of course, being suspended for the start of next year. Edging towards bust, but I'm going to go for mediocre here because those 2 years he was that good. Really helped the team. We'll see what happens in future. We'll revisit this one at some point. In the 2nd round, Levante David. That was a home run. One of the best linebackers in the league since he was drafted. Moving on to 2013. No 1st rounder that year. In the 2nd, Jonathan Banks, the cornerback. He was a bust. In the 3rd, Mike Glennon, the quarterback. Started a few games for the Bucs, a whole season, and a few other games. Struggled. One of the worst offenses I have ever seen. I don't think a huge amount of that is on Glennon. I think he's at worst a backup in this league, at best a low-level starter. The Bucs, I'm going to give this a mediocre simply because I think the Bucs will get good value in terms of a compensatory pick next year because of the contract he signed with the Bears. It will likely be a 3rd. He was a 3rd, possibly even a 4th. But I think he was reasonable. In the 4th, William Golston, the defensive end. He goes down as a value pick. One of the best run-stuffing defensive ends in the league. Doesn't offer much pass rush, but he's re-signed with the team. Good part of a rotation. Good value for a 4th round pick. Now moving on to 2014. Now before I get to these last 3 years, I'm a little bit more lenient here. A bit more sitting on the fence, of course. Some of these players, particularly in the last 2 drafts, haven't played very much for teams. So it's harder to come to a conclusion as to whether they're a solid pick or a bust. So there'll be a lot more in the middle. If I feel strongly, though, I will make a decision. So 2014, we got Mike Evans with the 7th overall pick, the wide receiver. 1,000 yards all 3 of his seasons. One of the best receivers in the league last year, I thought. Been a really good player. That's definitely a solid pick there. In the second, Austin Stafarian-Jenkins, the tight end. That's a bust. The talent's there, but made some mistakes, got cut. Suspended for the Jets to start next season. Yeah, definitely a bust. In the third, Charles Sims. I've gone with solid here because I think he's a good option at running back. Good in the receiving game. We saw last year, probably not an every down, lead runner, but he's got a role in this offense. So I'm going to give that a solid pick if the Bucs can get, Doug Mike back on track. Although I don't know if he'll get that opportunity or another running back. He's a good player. Moving on, should maybe go with mediocre there, I don't know. Going with the 2015 draft. Now this may end up going down in the top 10 list as one of my favourites. Really good class, I think. So Jameis Winston with the first overall pick. I think he's been solid thus far in his career. There's been improvement. Still a bit inconsistent. Throws a few too many picks, but shown enough that I think you can say he's going to be a long-time starter in this league. Potentially a very good one. In the second, Donovan Smith, the offensive tackle. Been playing at left tackle. I think he's better suited to playing on the right, but I've got to grade this as solid. Simply, I've said tackle play in this league is hard to find at the minute. He's been a competent left tackle. I think he'll be a long-term staple on this offensive line. To find that in the second round, it is good value. That's a solid pick. And also in the second, Ali Marpet, the guard. He's been really, really good since he got into the league. I think one of the better young guards in football. That's an absolutely solid pick there. And in the fourth round, Quan Alexander, who's been the starting middle linebacker, tackling machine. Great value in the fourth. I think he's a good young player. So, yeah, very happy with that selection. I think that's worked out well for the Bucs. Great draft all round. 2016, Vernon Hargreaves with the 11th overall pick, the cornerback. I think he had a pretty good rookie year. Not willing to pass judgment yet as to whether it's a solid pick or a bust. I'll sit on the fence there. Noah Spence in round 2, the defensive end. Again, he showed some flashes, particularly in the second half of last season. Played pretty well, but not going to make a judgment there. And the other second round pick, Roberto Aguayo, the kicker. I was angry at the time, but I at least thought we were going to get a good kicker. Well, turns out he was an absolute disaster. I am willing to go with bust here. If you draft a kicker in the first 3 rounds, he better be damn good. You never know, it may come together in the future, but at the minute, I'm going with a bust there. So, totaling up for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we've got 8 solid picks, 2 absolute home runs in Levante David and Gerald McCoy, and 5 value picks. Not bad on the value side there, maybe higher end of average. However, the rest of it, 10 other picks, is absolutely not good enough in your first, second and third rounders. That's a very poor score. With 12 total busts, well 13 because I upgraded Aguayo to 1. So that means a total score of +2. Very, very poor score. Really, that 2015 draft class has salvaged this score a little bit. If it's not for that, this ranks among the very worst in the league. In the first round, there's been 10 selections. 4 have been solid picks. 4 have been busts. And there are 2 that I'm undecided on in Doug Martin and Vernon Hargreaves. So, pretty clear. One of the lowest scores in the league, as I say, 1 draft, keeping it from being one of the absolute worst. Clearly, this team has struggled to draft. Getting that many players, 15 players out of this, is just, that's not good enough. There's a reason this team has been poor. There was a stretch, those first 6 or so drafts up until 2012, where the Buccaneers came out of it with 1 long-term starter. 1. I mean, Zutar could have been, but he ended up being traded away in Gerald McCoy. That's absolutely atrocious. So it's no wonder this team's been as bad as it has for so long. Maybe things look like they're looking up. These last 2 or 3 drafts that look significantly better, had more production from those players already. Arrow might be pointing up, but yeah, this team has struggled with this process. So what do you guys think? Have you enjoyed the series so far? Let me know below. As I say, the Friday episode will really build on all of this information, give it a lot more context. Definitely recommend checking that one out. I think it's going to be a great episode. What do you guys think of the Bucks? Do you think the arrow's pointing up on this franchise, or do you think they'll just revert back to the mean and go back to being terrible? Let me know, Facebook comments, Cover Zero on Facebook, comments below, Twitter, all of those. I'll do my best to get back to absolutely everyone. It's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed doing this series so far. If you've enjoyed it, check out some more of the videos. Going to have every franchise up by the end of the week. So thank you very much for listening. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thank you again. It's been a pleasure. And as always, go Bucks.